I'm talking.
Test test.
session. So I'm just going to go ahead and admit publicly to everyone out there, I over-prepare, if you haven't guessed, by where I'm sitting and what you're looking at. So I guess I will take that side of the debate today, and I'll hand it off to James.
All right, and I am playing the underprepared, underready, have not touched a single book or anything DM tonight, which we all know isn't completely correct for my game style, but it is closer to that point than it is the over preparation that Corey has done for this fantastic module that he's about to run this week.
All right, so I think let's put our first question out there, which is I think we drafted these up a little bit ago. So
Oops.
when you put a large amount of work into your prep, do you impose limits on the creativity of your players? So by prepping too much, do we put too many borders around our players? I'll let you start on this one.
I think there's a thin line for this. As a game master, you have an interest not only in the players but in your story. And I personally agree that when you prep too much, you have too much detail in every piece. Every NPC has dialogue that they have to say that night, or you want them to go this direction only, and there's no other options for them. You break away from the allowance of choice, and what it isn't, though it isn't a horrible thing, the more you prep, the more you feel let down as a game master, in my opinion, when you don't get to use all that work you've done. If you've put 6, 7, 8 hours in a week, and some people, other than me, of course, only run one game a week. So you are only focused on that one game. But when you are only focused on that one game, sometimes it's dangerous because of that reason. You're always thinking just about that one game. And that, to me, I think is a danger of over prepping. Corey?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that, I mean, you look at this, this took months of me prepping. Luckily, this was also for chapter one of, The Darkest Dream from GUI Cube in the Red Star Rising campaign. So a lot of that story prep was done for me. Thank you. Yep, good shout out there. Um, a lot of the story was done for me, and chapter one is very sandboxy, and it would take you a long time for everybody to hit everything in that module anyway. So I agree with what you're saying. As far as me and how I feel about over prepping, like you can see in front of you, is a lot of it does kind of go by the wayside. If I had written all of, for example, a Murder in Motley that happens in the same place that I'm running over a 4-hour period starting Monday, all throughout next week, we're running these games here at Game Train, and I know that all of the stuff I've prepped in that session will not happen. But my hope, I'm just crossing my fingers here, that after running this a couple of times here at Game Train, by setting this up at Gen Con, and maybe seeing some of you folks there at Gen Con to play through a Murder in Motley, or Chaos at the Carnival, which are the two things we're running here, hopefully by doing it at cons and doing it again and again, different things will happen, and all the stuff that I've prepped for and spent, hours and hours and hours writing what you're saying. When they go over here to the wagon of tastes, and I have some dialogue written, right? But if they don't go there, that dialogue's wasted. Now, I hope to run this again and again. If I was doing this in a campaign, if I was doing this for a group of friends, or if I was doing something, putting all this together just for them to run through one module and then move on to somewhere else, what would I do with all this stuff, right? So that's I agree with you on that front. However, I will disagree that if you have all of this stuff written out and you're not you're not offended or taken aback by stuff being missed that you wrote. Um, I think having all that stuff, having side quests that you have ready to just hand people and having handouts and I, I guess when I look at what I've done here and I think of why I did it, it's really about I would I'm building the table I would love to sit down at. And I have to hand off some of that to GUI Cube because the handouts and the story and all of that stuff from chapter one is just amazing. And I just feel like, if I was going to sit down at a table, I would want this, and I would want a soundscape, and I would want all of I would want all the portraits that people are showing me, all those characters. Yep, the twins were upside down. Um, so yeah, that's my side of it. But I think you're right. If you're running this as a weekly game, doing what I do is way too much. But I also hope to do this again and again with events and whatnot. Okay, I've talked enough. Back to you.
So you brought up a good point, and it's something that I've definitely hit the rock with on multiple occasions where I did prep too much. But I will say, if you're running an ongoing campaign and you are the game master and you know there are things that they've missed, there is nothing wrong with you reskinning and reevaluating the encounter or the NPC or the knowledge that you want to give your players for the world lore or story that can't be moved somewhere else in a book or can't be moved somewhere else in the world. And I think that is the one thing over preparation can be a wonderful point in, is the fact that you now have this massive, like, organized or unorganized, depending on how good you are at organization, which is a completely separate topic that we don't need to go into tonight. If you have all this information, you have characters, you have settings, you have dialogue, finding ways to use it when you didn't use it before is how you can make that still feel authentic, which kind of steps us into our secondary topic, which is how much is too much. Corey?
If you're gonna run it once, this is too much. But yeah, I would say how much is too much is if it starts to look like you're railroading your players and they don't get the opportunity to make decisions. I mean, really, that's what games are about. Whether it's a tabletop game or you're just a board game, or whether it's a role play game, it's really about posing interesting and challenging decisions to the players at the table, right? So if your over prep has taken that away from your players, then that's too much, in my opinion. If you over prep and it's just so that there is a wider, broader things for them to explore, but you're not railroading them, okay. But if you're railroading them down a certain path or trying to tell your story, write a book, don't run a game.
So I'm gonna steal something, and I'm going to steal it shamelessly and state who it's stolen from, which is Brandon Lee Mulligan, who runs game mastering for Dimension 20. He stated something that really hit me hard and made sense to me when he stated how much is too much. You want to prep enough where things are just easy enough to understand no matter what direction you go without having to do everything. So if there's a town and there's a forest, or there's two towns, and you know that there's a mountain to the north and a forest to the west, you don't really have to plan that in between area, because you can understand that when there's forests, there's monsters, towns can get attacked by and you can start to really understand that dynamic. And then we're going to jump to a second person, who is Alphinius, the wonderful wizard of Goo, who states asking questions of why. As long as you can answer a why, I think you haven't prepped too much. It's when you start answering every why, every single one, where you start to take that illusion and that freedom from your players to allow them to dictate it just enough to be in the world. Because the thing that we always have to remember as game masters is we need to make our players feel like not that they aren't just side characters in our world, but they are influencing and changing the world for being there. Because they are your main characters in a book.
Yeah, I like that. You need to be able to answer some of the whys. You need to be able to answer some of the basic things. That doesn't mean you need to prep those things. And part of this is knowing your world well enough, knowing what is possible, what isn't possible, well enough that when somebody asks a why question or goes down a certain route, you can fill in the gaps. So, for example, if you know the module, if you're running a module and you've read it cover to cover, maybe twice, and somebody does something harebrained out of the way, it's okay because you know it well enough that you can get them back on track. If you're writing your own stuff, it's kind of the same thing. If you know where the plot's going and what the enemies are about and why they want to do what they want to do, and somebody throws a monkey wrench in it, go ahead and let them play out that monkey wrench and guide them back. I'm knocking trees over. Guide them back onto the path. So I guess to summarize here, the over prep in knowledge of the world and knowledge of the people in it and the things happening in it is not over prepping. Trying to outline a specific plot to the point where you know what everybody's going to say is. So I'm going to flip it on its head, and I'm going to ask you a question. What is the minimum amount of preparation that you need to do to run a good game?
So I will take this in two steps. When I'm running my games, my back home, hidden from the world, I want three main things. I want to know where the story starts. So I want to bring the action immediately. I want to make sure that players are immediately engaged in the game. Whether that is immediate combat, maybe that is an immediate connection with an NPC, maybe that is a strange mystery that just comes out of the blue. Maybe somebody is taken, anything. But think about any action movie. The best example I can think of is James Bond. You don't start a James Bond movie without an explosion. And I think when you bring those types of feelings into D&D, it really catches the players to pay attention. And then you've got them. So as long as you just keep that emotional high, you're good. So starting, you want to have a big beginning. You want to know who your main NPCs are. And it can be 2 to 6, I would say, max. And you want to know what their want is. And you want to know how hard they're going to work for it. And that could be your villains. That could be a faction connection. That could be a story driver or a plot device. You want to know what your scene is. What the direction you want the story to go. But you don't want to put so much detail in that timeline that makes no sense if they decide to devise off of it. The way I do mine is I do one sentence per scene, and then from there I will be able to think and make sure that I can understand where the scene is in the game, in the story. And then finally, you want to give them some sort of reward. And we talked about this last week, that either a external reward or an internal reward. You want to make sure that the players feel like they're gaining something as they're traveling through your story. So, a beginning, understanding the characters, and a reward, and then locations. Those are the 4 things I prep for every session, no matter what. Now, I might sprinkle in other things, or number 5, secrets. Secrets and lore. I took this directly out of Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy DM. I will admit 90% of the stuff I do has been stolen, manipulated, twisted, whatever you want to call it, by another game master in my repertoire of hundreds of game masters. But who doesn't anymore? So it's really not a big deal. You take what you see in each of these places and you use it for your own game, whatever works for you. And I think this is the minimum you need. And it should only take you about, the minimum I'll prep is an hour. Anything over an hour, and I'm either over prepping or I'm readying something that has to be prepped. So that doesn't count for maps. Let's flip this around a minute. That doesn't account for stuff that has to actually be built. That is a completely separate project, because once you figure all this out, now you have to come up with what you need. And online gaming is horrible sometimes for it, because not only do I don't have 70,000 modular pieces that I can just go grab and put together and make a giant Dwarven Forge thing. I'm not rich. It's not going to happen. One day, maybe, and I'd love to do that on my stream, but if y'all want to see that, y'all going to have to donate. That's all I'm saying. But my thought process on that is that means I have to do extra work to get those things in, whether it's music, whether it's handouts, whether it's tokens, whether it's maps. Those I take out of story prep. And I think the maximum I've done, I'll say the minimum I've done in gaming the last year and a half has been about an hour and a half. And that's if people didn't get to maps that I had already prepped. Map prepping is a completely separate topic, and it can be hours depending on what I have to get actually prepped for it.
So I'm gonna jump in here with I got a question for you, but I'm gonna first make an observation that if anybody from Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast ever sees this, maybe they will see the virtual tabletop supplements that are coming out of them right now, the black and white sketches that are coming with current Wizards of the Coast modules. I don't know if they're trying to take us back to the 1970s, but they look terrible. Put some effort into your maps, Wizards of the Coast, for virtual tabletop stuff. Thank you. Okay, now my question for you. You said you have a sentence per scene or per chapter. Can you give me an example of that? What does that look like?
So let's say, let me pull up one of my episodes. Because I said everything is episode, partially because we stream weekly, and then even my home games are set up in episodes. So I've got my last game on Tuesday, which is my hidden evil campaign running through Tomb of Annihilation in a manipulated way. So some of my scenes will say the Champions of Soul confrontation in the end. So that's that just sets the first scene. Now I know everything in my head of what that could mean. And I've prepped tokens for that, I've prepped a map for that, certain things like that. But other parts is just to keep my structure somewhat fluid. Now if they veer off of it, improv kicks in and you run the rabbit hole as hard as you have to. But The second scene says gathering of final equipment before the trip to the fort. Third one, assault on the fort. Fourth one, the inner chambers of the fort. Fifth one, the confrontation between the champions of Seoul. Sixth one, the findings of artists in shackles in the prison. The next one says his story of Mesro and knowledge of Rasi. And then the final one says recovering of the Ring of Winter. It's a single sentence that can give me an idea of a scene that needs to be promoted, and it continues to dictate the story. Anything outside of this is outside of the main story, and most of the time is either cliff notes by maybe a sentence or two that is built during the game itself, or I reference it within secrets and clues, which is 10 things that the characters can find out throughout the entire session. And I don't place where those could be because I wait and see how organically they would feel. Rather, they'd find them on a note. They could find them out information from an NPC. They could interrogate a bad guy. I mean, all different types of ways, but I try not to give myself such restraints that they can't find this information out if it's going to help them produce either character development, lore development, or story development. Those, I think, are the three main things that I try to focus on with secrets and clues.
I like that. Keeping it very simple, as this is what the scene's about, right? This is going to lead to this. Is going to lead to this. 5 sentences. That's 5 different scenes through for the session, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll probably steal that, like you were saying, stealing things from people, because that's as you're planning out a session, especially in a campaign, that makes complete sense. So, and I think that we're talking about preparing sessions tonight, and we've kind of talked about 2 different styles, right? Preparing something that you're going to run over and over, like a convention game. Or a retreat game where you run the same module over a weekend with different groups of people, versus prepping for something that is for a small group of people, and you're not really concerned about capturing that in any way, unless you're streaming it, but then you're just capturing what happens, right? But you're not looking at it's just a story for those 5-6 people. And in that, I'm gonna kind of switch back over to what you were saying earlier, that less is more, kind of. You don't have to do this type of stuff, and if you want to get into 3D modeling and doing things like that, do things that you can use in different scenarios. Do things that you can reuse and reuse. Don't. I probably wouldn't own a 3D printed Carnival if I didn't plan to run this again and again, because it's not a scene, or it's not a set basically that you can use with the same group of people to tell a longer story. So yeah, I think if you're running with a group of people, knowing where you're going, like you said, knowing those NPCs and what they're after, what they want, and even having possibly an NPC that helps you tell some of that lore, that's a common reoccurring NPC that you can kind of lean on as the GM for your exposition, and then just leaving it at short prep, and then see where the characters go. And that's the other thing. And the one of the things I'll link in the YouTube below is the thing that Alphinius said when he was talking about being a good GM, or GM level 2, or whatever that video he made was. The more you make it about the players and their characters, the better the story's going to be. So even if your prep, and this is something we haven't talked about yet, as part of your prep in a campaign setting with a group of people playing the same characters over and over, think about the present you're going to give each player that night. what is the storyline present, or maybe it's an item present that they find, something that they get to unwrap and discover right there during the game that is all about their character or their backstory. And if you can do that for each character once an evening, man, that's some good time prepping. That's like well worth the prep time.
I'm stealing that. That is awesome. I'm just gonna call that immediately. So I take every one of my, and I know I've mentioned this in the last stream. Every time I play a game, the first thing I do before I start prepping, no matter if it's the night before, no matter if it's the day after the game, the first thing I will do when I start actually writing story prep is I reread the last prepped episode just to make sure that I've got, and normally I'll just copy and paste because, internet's awesome. But I will then go back and I will reread everyone's backstory. And it's only, and part of this is for my own understanding, because when you're playing 3 or 4 different games in 3 or 4 different settings, things can blend very easily, especially when you don't do this full time. So I have a full time job, I have family, I have 3 games. Things blend all the time. But I think when you read those characters over and immediately you're in that headspace. And you always, I would say, if you can't give them a present every episode, or you aren't ready to give them a present every episode, you need to then bring a bigger present in a couple episodes. So like the main one I'm doing right now is everybody in my evil campaign is hunting for something. Our wizard got a book that it pointed them to 2 more artifacts that they're both hunting for now. But one of my other players who isn't getting that because he already has the weapon, it's in a dormant state and he hasn't figured out how to unlock it yet, he put in his backstory that he had a rival. So I immediately, because everybody else is finding stuff that they want and he's not sure how to get his, now his rival has entered the story. And when I mention the rival's name, listening to the tone and inflection, the change of the voice, if you've got video on, watching people's expressions change, and if you're at the table, it's even more fun because people will get up, people will move, people will fidget, because you are now directly involving them in the story. And that is where you don't always have to give a present every episode, but when you give a nugget like that, you've hooked them for multiple episodes in a row, which I think either one works wonders. But I do want to try to at least give everyone some sort of spotlight every game, because you don't want somebody to feel like they're just bored.
I agree with that, and I think that let me clarify for people: a present doesn't always have to be good or positive. It can be a challenge for them. It can be something, like you said, that's a storyline piece that makes them go, "Oh no, what's going to happen? I don't know about this." But that's still a present, right? Because it involves them, it engages them, and thinking about that and how you can do that in every session, and here I'm gonna flip back to this style, right? The con gaming, one shots. There's kind of an art form to continue to do that, whether it's using pre-gens and having something that's directly about that pre-gen, or just quickly getting up to speed on what the people at the table want out of the session, by seeing how they interact with what's going on, and then going, okay, I got something for that guy. That guy's wanting to, best somebody. That's the type of player they are. So I'm going to try and give them a place where they can wrestle somebody, or they can have an arm wrestling tournament, or something where they can get that thing that they're looking for at the table. So, gifts. That's when I think about running games, that's what I think it's all about, is how can I give my players something to unwrap, discover, and enjoy. Um, yeah, that comes down to it. Any other thoughts?
So the only thing I can think of, and I think it's really cool that you brought that up, and this is an experience I've not had personally yet, is to be able to actually go to a con and play in a con game. I've played many online games since the whole pandemic thing has kicked off, and I've ran for multiple groups of people. But to play in front of people that you've never met before, and you're bringing them this experience that is supposed to be memorable, you are exactly right. You have to give them something that connects them not only to the story but to their personal connection to the game. So if it's a challenge, if it's and really you have to be one of the main things as a game master that I've taken years to learn, and I know Corey's probably going to say the same thing, is you have to be able to read your players in a very quick motive to understand the direction that they want to go. Or you can do the easy way of doing it, and you pull out a little survey card at the beginning of the game and you go, hey, which one do you like, social, exploration, or combat? But 75% of people won't be honest with you anyways because they don't know. And what they don't know, they can't be honest about. So you throw these interactions in and you throw all three pillars into the game, and you watch when people's eyes light up and when people get excited to do things. And that's when you can see then how each player is interacting in the game properly.
And I've seen other GMs do something right off the bat. You know how you saying start the game off with something big, right? I've seen others use some scenario that is kind of a prequel to, the adventure's about this, but we're going to go back to last week when you guys were all hanging around the campfire and you had to run away from something. So here's this thing that came out. What was it? And you have somebody like tell that part of the story, right? And then somebody else, and you just kind of say, you have them make up that vignette about what happened a week ago before we even got started, so that you can quickly assess, oh, this person likes this person likes that, this person was willing to sacrifice themselves so everybody else could get away. Okay, I've learned something about these players. And you can do that in a quick 10-minute vignette before you even get your story rolling.
Yeah, so that you really have to, and I think in a place like a con, that'd be great because you don't know personalities, you don't know what their quirks and their. So if you play with friends all the time, you know there's going to be the ones that are super talkative, the ones that are not going to talk at all, and the ones that you have to pull that information from. But in a con, you don't know any of that, and in a one shot, you don't know any of that normally. And those types of things, like you said, is giving them that immediate, on the spot trigger that you have to answer, and you allow them to talk as long as they want, because that is their 5 seconds of fame before the game even starts.
All right, so I think we've. I don't know. I don't want to beat a dead horse here about prepping for a session. You can see that sometimes I prep way too much, but this is because I feel like I want to use these things again and again. Um, any last comments, James?
Uh, Man, like I said, I first off, fantastic display. Like that's comment number one. Um, Last comment would be is if you're not doing this for a show with strangers, even if it is with strangers, but if you're not doing this in a mentality where where you feel uncomfortable, enjoy the process. Enjoy the time you have with all of your players and allow that to help tell the story. I never tell people that we're playing a game. I always tell people we are building a collaborative story together. And that is where I believe the the diamond in the middle of everything is that if you are building a collaborative story together, you will not only have experiences that you will remember for a lifetime, you will make friendships that you never thought would ever produce both in game and out.
Completely agree with that. Matter of fact, that's why I have friends all over the country and all over the world right now, is because uh, exactly what you described has happened at tables, whether I was running the game or other people were running the game. And it's a way to make lifelong friends. It really is. Telling a collaborative story is one of the most powerful things you can do to bring people together.
So for our finale, we want to let you know that we will not.
Looks like you're muted. You can't hear me.
Gotcha. So I wasn't pushing the button. I was using both hands. It wasn't working. But for our finale, we will not be here next week. I apologize. I know you're enjoying this, and this is great information. But next week, both of us are out of town, and he's going to be running this fantastic game, which, in all honesty, I think he should stream, but that's up to him. And I will be out of town for work. So the following week, we will be picking up in a whole new scenario. I'm going to be coming up with questions, and if you have questions about this, please feel free to send them to me in any manner you can. We're going to bring Corey back, because Corey is literally my partner in this now, and he's coming back every week, because otherwise, yeah. But we're going to bring one of Corey's friends in, who is creating with Corey a brand new module for Savage Worlds. If you don't know what Savage Worlds is, it's different than D&D. And it has much different mechanics to it, but it is still a collaborative storytelling roleplay game. And that's where we're going to come to, but it has a twist, because this is an Asian culture, Far East Asian. It's supposed to not only be fantasy, but historic. And I'm really excited because, in all honesty, I see nothing but fantasy, medieval, European, your average everyday D&D. And when they bring things like this in, that's not only going to be interesting in a fantasy standing, but also in a historic standing, you're going to see different things that you aren't used to seeing, which then I believe you should break out of that box anyways, because you're going to learn things. So please come back in 2 weeks. Don't forget about us. And we are going to talk to him and his friend James, funny enough, about their book that they're writing and how to co-DM, as well as how to tell a story in a role-playing game from another culture's perspective. And finally, because we didn't do this yet, I am drinking a Sherwood Forest beer from St. George in Virginia. There's a local beer company, and it is a delicious dark English mild. Corey is...
Well, I've already finished my beer, and Tristan came and grabbed it. So I was drinking a 90 shilling, and I might have another here in a minute. But yeah, that's what I was drinking.
So until next time, clink your glasses together and come join us again on Tavern Talks. We will see you all soon. Have a wonderful evening.
See you later.